before we get started. So let's go ahead and take a nice big deep breath in and out. Let's do one more. In and out. Remember, I said it's the little things that take a little amount of time that do a big number on helping us through our day. All right. So I just spent a whole bunch of time talking about you. Now we're going to get into talking about some kids stuff. And contact information is all the same. Both PowerPoints from this morning and the PowerPoint from this session is going to be on the same live binder. I only have one link for everything. So if you didn't catch it, you can grab it now. It again will be the very last thing I put up before I walk away. So we are talking about in this session, the Search Institute's developmental assets and building resiliency. And I'm also going to tap in on what Search Institute calls developmental relationships today. So I have a ton of information to give in this very teeny amount of time. And so I'm going to be kind of at a fast pace, but again, don't worry. Everything is on the live binder, full, like PDF printouts of all of the assets that you can print out. Don't feel like you have to like write everything down. You already have access to all of this through that link. And if you are unable to get that link, shoot me an email and I'll happily send you the things through attachments and emails if you need that. Okay, so how many of you all have heard of the Search Institute's 40 developmental assets? Okay, so no one's raised their hands. So that makes me feel like fresh ears, which is really exciting because the Search Institute is awesome. I have linked their website onto the live binder, as well as all of their research and resources and book recommendations, yada, yada. All right. So the Search Institute is a nonprofit agency housed in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And back in the early 1990s, there were a lot of agencies that were doing research on things like trauma, right? Which is one of my specialties too, like understanding how trauma impacts and can lead to difficulties later in life. There were other research studies based on other types of developmental delays and how that can impact your later future and all kinds of what happens when a bunch of bad stuff happens to you, right? And the Search Institute during that time said, okay, well, I mean, that's all great, but like, what do kids need, right? What are the things that we could do that would help them thrive and survive through this thing called life, right? What are those protective factors that we can build for kids? What do they need? And so they did all this research all over, and they came down to 40 things. Now, 40 is a lot, right? Like I said, don't feel like you have to write each of them down. You have a whole 8.5 by 11 in several languages that you can print off the PDF for. But it does all fit on one side of that 8.5 by 11. And I think that's so cool because these are the 40 things that kids need. And I love using this as kind of the antidote to all of those hard things, right? Have you ever heard a parent say things like, well, they didn't give me an instruction booklet when I had this baby, right? Well, now you can say, oh, well, you just didn't get yours. Here it is. These are the 40 things that kids need to survive and thrive. And I love that about these. I love thinking about these resiliency skills, these really powerful things that kids need. Now, this research was not, it's not based on like 100 kids in South Dakota, right? This has actually been researched all over the world, 275 plus countries, millions and millions of children right here in the United States, and also all over the world have been a part of this survey and continue to be a part of this research. So it's super cool. Like I said, there's 40 things, and they organize it first by splitting those 40 things into two halves, right? So there are 20 assets that they recognize as external assets. These are things that as children, we get from the outside in, right? We get these things from the outside in. And then there are 20 that are considered internal assets. So these assets are things that we build from within, right? So with the help and guidance and support of the adults and stuff in our lives, but we actually have to build them from within, right? So we have external assets and internal assets. Those halves then are broken down each into 4 categories of kind of, they've just grouped them together just to organize it and make sense of it. And so I'm going to go through each of the 40 just to give voice to them. I'm not going to try and spend a whole lot of time on them, but it does feel a little Ferris Buellery as I like just like go through them. But I think it's important to just hear all 40. So before we, there we go. Especially before we get into how we build this. So like I said, the first half is external assets, things we get from the outside in. And the 4 categories are support, empowerment, boundaries, expectations, and constructive use of time. Now, the next slide has so many words on it. Again, don't feel pressure to write them all down. I just wanted to list them all on one page. So when we look at these categories, our first asset that they found kids need is they need family support. I need someone at home that cares about what I'm doing and, just cares about me. Number 2, I need someone at home that I could speak to in a way in which we're not fighting, right? That I have someone at home that I can count on to talk to. Number 3 is other adult relationships. This one's a little tough in this day and age. I think that we're a little fearful of letting our children get in good relationships with coaches or scout leaders or religious leaders, teachers. We're nervous about what that can mean. And so we get really protective and bubble our kids in. But these relationships are actually really important for the overall thriving. I think you could probably look back on your life and recognize some adults in your life that had a really huge impact on who you are now, but you weren't related to that person, right? It was a teacher, it was a coach, it was a religious leader, someone who in your life really made an important play, right, for you. Those adult relationships are important. It's okay as a parent or as a teacher to create a safety net for our kids so that that they are protected, but we don't want to forego those relationships because they're so important. Number 4, I always say, is my neighborhood's least favorite asset, because I am that crazy neighbor who like will chase down your car before you get your garage door down and stand and talk to you for like an hour, right? I'm that annoying neighbor who always wants to talk. And but because of that, we've been able to establish a really close, tight-knit neighborhood of friends and really supportive network. And kids need that. Kids need to know that the people around me care about me, know what I'm doing, know who I am. The next one is caring school climate. So this is an external caring school climate, right? I feel like the people here in my school building, they care about me. They care about me more than the thing I'm most known for, right? So they care about me more than my scores on the test. They care about me more than the score on the scoreboard on Friday night. They care about me more than my behavior, my skill set. They just care about me, right? That's that external caring. The next one is parent involvement in schooling. This is a huge spectrum, all the way from our PTO president to just that parent at home saying, hey, what'd you do today? Let's go through your backpack, right? That is all included in that parent involvement in schooling. Our next group is empowerment, and it starts with community that values our youth, that we're not just waiting for them to grow up, right? That we value who they are. We don't just see them as like, possible criminals, and we don't see them as dangerous. We see them as contributing members, of our community. We also, as a child, I need to be seen as a resource myself. I've seen so many schools do this in such cool ways, right? Where we have seniors in high school that are partnering with senior citizens and teaching them how to use their phones or tablets, right? I saw at a parent teacher night, there were a couple of kids, middle school kids, a couple of years ago, where they were running a session where they were teaching parents how to play Fortnite. Right? We're seeing kids as unique resources themselves, that I actually not just am I valued in this community, but I can offer something to this community that really only I can. The next one is service to others. Service to others is a tricky one because they need to know that they're doing service to others and what that means. So it's not just, well, I'm bringing a canned food, to win the contest or to wear jeans on Friday, but I understand about what that canned food can mean for other families that are experiencing food insecurity, right? So it's not just the doing of the service, but the knowing that I'm doing of the service. That's important. And then kids need to feel safe. They need to feel safe at home. They need to feel safe in their neighborhoods and at school. And moving into boundaries and expectations, they need boundaries and expectations at home, in school, and in their neighborhoods. Now, the best case scenario is that those boundaries and expectations are similar across environments, right? This doesn't mean that we have to share values, right? So it doesn't mean that me and the student have to have the same belief system or share the same values, but that the expectations and boundaries are similar. What doesn't fly at school also doesn't fly at home, right? That's what I mean, that's going to be the best case scenario. We also want kids who have positive adult role models. So maybe, we've got a great relationship with a coach or with a teacher, but, oh, well, I know that my science teacher, he went to BGSU. That's where I want to go. And so I'm going to talk to him about that. And maybe I can even shadow when he goes to an alumni event, right? That's more adult role modeling. We also want kids that have positive peer influence in their lives. I always say this is like the Neville Longbottom, for those of you Harry Potter fans. If you're not, Neville Longbottom is the character in Harry Potter who's always kind of telling Harry Potter, like, dude, stop breaking the rules, right? We need that in our life. We need that little kind of Jiminy Cricket friend that's saying, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't flush all the paper towels down the toilet, right? That good kid that's helping other good kids to make good choices. That's that positive peer influence. And then we also need high expectations. And these high expectations have to be coupled with high support, right? I think about this on a grid where, we have high expectations here. We don't want low support, right? Because I see that in schools where maybe a parent says, why is my kid failing math? I'm like, well, I mean, he hasn't been doing his homework. Have you been checking your folder? Have you been going over it at home? And the parent's like, why should I teach math? Isn't that your job? That's high expectations, low support. We also don't want low expectations, low support. I see this in school sometimes where I'll hear teachers or administrators say things like, I'll ask about a kid and they'll say, oh, we're just waiting for placement in an alternative learning area. That's low expectations, low support. We're kind of done supporting him because he's not really going to do anything different anyway, right? Low expectations, low support. We also don't want low expectations, high support, right? I think about this, my kid's soccer team, where parents on the side that are like, oh my gosh, my kid's the best soccer player in the whole world. He's going to get college scholarship. It's going to be so great. Like, meanwhile, the kid's like laying in the grass playing with dandelions, right? That's low expectations, high support, right? We don't want that. What we want is high expectations and high support. I know you can do this. I know you can reach this goal. I know you can stretch, and I'm going to help you by scaffolding, providing supports, and just being your cheerleader through it, right? High expectations, high support. The next group is our constructive use of time. Kids need 2 or more hours per week in creative activities. These are your fine arts, art, drawing, painting. Also, this includes your musical arts. So band, orchestra, choir, musical theater. This is dramatic arts, drama, dance, right? Those kinds of things. This is creative activities, 2 or more hours per week. This doesn't have to be outside of school, okay? It's just 2 or more hours per week. The next one is kids need 2 or more hours per week in youth programming. This is inclusive of our PE classes, recess, all of our athletics and sports, things like scouts, after school programming, boys and girls club, that kind of stuff. 19 is our religious communities. Now, there's research on some of the spirituality of that, but what I think is really powerful actually is the importance of intergenerational relationships here. So these are often found in religious communities. That means I know Mr. Johnson, he's the same age as my grandpa, and we have a relationship, right? But what I love about that, knowing that that's the really key part of this religious community piece, is that intergenerational relationship. That means that I, as a parent, if I do not ascribe to a certain religious community, that I can still get that asset met for my child in another type of community resource opportunity, because I can seek out those intergenerational relationships elsewhere. All right. And then the last one is time at home. Now, for a long time, I said this was a really hard sell. And then for 2 solid years, we did nothing but spend time at home. But now that hamster wheel's starting back up and we're getting crazy, schedules again. But what kids need is 2 nights at home per week with nothing particular to do but spend time with family. 2 nights at home per week. That's a tough sell for some families. All right. Now we're moving into our internal assets. Remember, I said these were the assets that build from within, right? And we start this list with our commitment to learning. And our first one here is achievement motivation. This is that internal feeling that I can reach a goal. I can get a little bit of a better score. I can, shave my time by a second. I can, work hard and get into that art show at the end of the year, right? That's that achievement motivation. I can do more. School engagement, this moves away from that kind of external feeling that these people care about me and more of that internal feeling of like, sure, I'll help you hand out the graded homework. Yeah, I'll join the Spanish club or the student council, right? I want to be engaged in the community around me. The next one is homework. This one's kind of funky because the research goes always. Whatever you believe about homework, you can find research for it. I have a whole tab on my live binder with homework research. There is research that supports homework that says homework does increase academic achievement for children. There's research that shows that it has 0 impact on overall academic achievement. And then there's also research that sits in the middle. So I'm a middle type of gal, and that middle research says that homework is good for kids who don't need it, and it's not helpful for kids who you think do need it. So for example, if I have a 94%, you give me homework, that's going to help me get to a 97%. But if I have a 74% and you give me homework, not only is that not going to help me get to a 77%, but it might even hurt me and push me down to a 72%. So that research is interesting. Check it out. Like I said, whatever your opinion is, there's research that will support it. The next one is bonding to school. So this moves beyond you care about me. This moves beyond, sure, I'll join the Spanish club. And now this moves into like, I'm a bulldog, right? This real identity around the community itself. All right, reading for pleasure. I read this just because I like it, not because it's assigned. All right, as we move into our positive values, we want kids who are caring, kids who understand equality and social justice and are willing to fight for it, kids with integrity, kids who are honest even when it's difficult, kids who understand and uphold responsibilities, and kids who understand a healthy lifestyle. Now, this means like, I know that I shouldn't smoke cigarettes. I know that if I eat the chicken nuggets, I should also eat the apple slices, right? That knowing of a healthy lifestyle. All right, as we move into our social competencies, our first one is planning and decision making. I can make a plan and then make decisions to accomplish that plan. Interpersonal competence, I can work with people of all different ages and in all different varieties of kind of group numberings, right? I can work with just one person, I can work in a large group. Cultural competence means I can work with and respect people from all backgrounds. Resistance skills, this is, not only do I know I shouldn't smoke cigarettes, but when presented with the opportunity to do so, I have the skills to say no. Peaceful conflict resolution, I'm able to resolve conflict without resorting to verbal or physical aggression. And when we move into our positive identity, first one is personal power. I have control over something. Right? I can choose what clothes I wear to go to school. I can choose what lunch I pick. I can choose my electives that I choose for this semester, right? I have power over something. Self-esteem, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a little bit, but my mom always used to say to me as a kid, she'd say, Missy, you don't want to have low self-esteem, but you also don't want to have high self-esteem. What you want is accurate self-esteem. I feel like that's pretty good advice, right? Do you guys know anybody who has like really high self-esteem about something that they shouldn't? Do you know anybody like that? Right? That starts to interfere with my interpersonal skills. It starts to interfere with a lot of things if I have that kind of overinflated self-esteem. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute. But it's okay to know the things I'm good at and not so good at. Number 39, I don't care if I am 5 or 12. 16 or 48, I need to feel like I am waking up and doing this all for a reason, right? I have to feel like there is purpose behind the things that I'm doing. And then lastly, I need to know that there is a future ahead for me and that that future looks good, right? This is something that's going to be great for me ahead of time, right? All right. Those are the 40 things. Like I said, I kind of blather on about them, but these 40 things are so powerful when you look at the research themselves, right? Because the more a child has, the more likely they are to succeed in these indicators of success, as well as many, many others. And you can check that out on the website. But I love looking at this. And the one I like to particularly focus on is the succeeding in school part, right? Where when you're looking at this, the difference between 0 to 10 and 31 to 40, this increases that child's success in school by 50%. And we're not talking anything about like intelligence or anything like that. We're just talking about social and emotional supports that this child has that helps increase their overall success at school. That's bonkers, right? And I think it can help us when we're thinking on the opposite end too, where sometimes we can get caught in that trap of like, you're just as smart as Jenny, right? If you only did what Jenny did, then you would succeed more too. But recognizing this isn't all about smarts, right? That sometimes there are things that are barriers in the way for kids. I don't have someone at home that's checking my bag. I don't have someone at home who I can talk to about what I'm experiencing. I don't feel connected to anyone in this room, right? And that's going to limit my abilities to succeed in here. And so by increasing these assets, we actually can improve success. I find absolutely awesome and amazing. I don't think you'd be surprised to know that on the opposite end of this, that the less of these assets a child has, the more likely they are to engage in all of these risky behaviors that we're trying to prevent at school with programming and campaigns, et cetera, right? Where if we just increase some of these assets, we would reduce risk. And I like looking at this from this perspective where, when you're looking at these 40 things, like 40 is a lot, like this is a lot of stuff. And a lot of it, I don't have any control over in my role. Like I don't have control over how safe their neighborhood is. I don't have control over that in my role. And so it can feel overwhelming or defeating to think about what I can do in my role in my school building. But when you look at this, I think it's super interesting because if you look at the difference between 0 to 10 and 11 to 20, right? Say a kid walks into my classroom and he can identify with 9 of these things, right? I have 9 of these things. So what you're telling me is if you recognize 9 of these things as something you have in your life, all I've got to do is find that one book series that helps you fall in love with reading. That's all. All I've got to do is find that one club, that one extracurricular that helps you feel a little bit more engaged in this school building. And if I find 1, 2 more things this school year, I move you from a 9 to an 11. And looking across this graph, moving someone from a 9 to 11 cuts their risk in half. That's huge. That's huge. I may not have control over a lot, but I do have control over some of these things. And just by increasing a couple, I can make a huge difference in their overall future. Just by finding that book, by finding that club, by helping them feel more connected, I can make a huge difference in their overall risk. I don't know if you'd be surprised to know this, but the research shows over and over again, it's been replicated all over, that more than half of kids in the United States have less than half of what they need. So that means more than half report less than 20. And that's crazy because when we're looking at these 40 things, when I'm reading through them, a lot of you might have been like, well, yeah, I mean, this is common sense. It's not common sense for a lot of kids. They don't have these things. And so this is kind of where the Search Institute took a turn in their research because they spent years figuring out what these 40 things were and then found out, oh my gosh, they have such a huge impact on the overall health and happiness of these kids in their future. And there are so many kids who don't have them. So what do we do now, right? We know what they need, but how? And that's where their research has gone since then. and it's still growing. They're still researching and figuring out how to build these. But right now, the current plan that they have right now kind of uh, works within this 3-pillar system, right? So this 3-pillar system, you'll notice, includes resilience, sparks, and developmental relationships. And you'll also notice that all of the arrows are both-sided, meaning that these things are interwoven and connected all the time, right? It's not like I do sparks and then I'm done, right? It's just like blah, 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 real messy within the work itself. But focusing on these 3 pillars is how we build these overall assets over time. It's not something I'm going to be able to do in 1 week, in 1 school year even. And so when we think about that kiddo who comes into kindergarten with a 9, right? How do we help him through kindergarten to strengthen that 9 so that in 1st grade we can build a 10? And then in 2nd grade, we can build on 10 and 11. And in 3rd grade, right? And then what is by the end of 12th grade, how many is he going to have strengthened, right? It's not something I do instantly. It's something that we look at as a full team that we can do over the 13 years that they're with us using these 3 ways. So what you're going to see is that I've actually kind of framed it around the 5 components of developmental relationships and included sparks and resiliency skills within those. So like I said, they're really interwoven. So big things, kind of big overarching ideas. First is that this is not one size fits all. Like I can't say, well, this is how I teach resilience to kids, or this is how I build relationships with kids, because every single kid is going to need something different. There are thousands of resiliency skills out there. The way I build relationships is completely different with every child and with every person. And a developmental relationship is pretty intense relationship. So how could I possibly build this full, huge, developmentally strong relationship with, all 30 of my kids or all 175 of the kids who come through my door every day? Well, I don't have to, right? Every relationship is different. I can build relationships with kids that are just kind of that like, hey, neighbor kind of relationship, right? I don't have to feel like I need a developmental, huge, powerful Robin Williams kind of relationship with every kid who comes into my space. But every kid who comes into the building, they deserve one. They deserve one of those relationships. And it doesn't have to be with me, but it's got to be with someone. Every child deserves this relationship. And that's when we move into really thinking about this as on purpose action, right? We think about relationships, we think about building resiliency, and it really works in so many ways, like organically, right? We depend a lot on the organic nature of building resiliency through human interaction or connecting with kids in relationships. We depend on that organic nature of it. There are just kids we click with, right? But sometimes kids just aren't good at that. And so those kids come into our buildings and they don't really get those relationships, or they don't really get those resiliency building skills because they're not really good at talking about how they need it, or they're not really good at clicking with people, right? So we have to be more purposeful and targeted about who needs these relationships, who needs this work. And, I find that in a school building, this is kind of polarizing, where on one end of the spectrum, our kids who are the highest achievers, the most involved, great kids up top, right? That are meeting all of expectations. Those kids tend to have really good relationships with teachers, with mentors, with coaches, etc. Right. But then we've got our kids who might be struggling the most, kiddos who need more, academic involvement, great kids, but maybe need more help behaviorally, right? All of those kids, they tend to actually have really great relationships too with folks like administrators and guidance counselors or school counselors and, interventionists. It's the kids in the middle that often get ignored, right? They kind of slip through the cracks. These kids that come in every day, that are doing what they're asked, kind of BC's kids, normal kids, but they're not getting the relationships that they need. And so we might say, well, we're building relationships with kids, we're doing a great job building relationships with kids, but we don't recognize that we're building those relationships or building those skill sets with the same kids. So what I do in schools is I actually have schools create full rosters. I've done this in person where the roster is actually hanging up on the wall. And I've done this through Google Docs as well. But I ask of every adult in the building, teacher, administrator, cafeteria worker, transportation, construction, or not construction, custodian, could not think of the word, to identify 2 to 3 kids that they have a really good relationship with. And they write down those 3 kids, right? And then I give them stickers if we're in person, or ask them to check it on a Google Doc, that regardless of how many stickers or checks that kid has, you put the sticker down on the 3 kids that you wrote down. And what you'll find when that activity is done is that there are many children that have many stickers, right? Missy, she's got 8 stickers, but then there are lots and lots of kids who don't have any, because we gravitate to the kids who are organically good at building these relationships, are good at kind of receiving this resilience education, because we're relying on that versus that purposeful action. But I like doing this activity because then it helps us better frame who our targets are, right? And we can say, okay, well, Jenny, she, what's she into? How can we start superficially with her, right? And get an adult to connect with her. It doesn't have to be me, but it's got to be someone. I don't have to have this great, powerful relationship with every child that comes in my door, but every child who comes in the door deserves this relationship with at least one adult. And how do we target that? So once we've targeted who we need to work with, we start building these relationships and building resiliency skills over time. So the first component of a developmental relationship is expressing care. There are 5 total components. And this is just, I'm going to be warm, I'm dependable, I care about what you think, I care about what you feel, right? Ways that we build resiliency through this is basic emotional literacy, is a resiliency skill that also accomplishes that express I care piece, right? That I care about what you have to say, I care about what you're feeling, and I want you to articulate that. I want us to, move beyond implementation by lamination. I know so many of us in classrooms have emoji charts and things like that that are laminated up on the wall, but then we don't do anything with them. But how are we incorporating that into everyday conversation? How you feeling today? I had a high school math teacher this was a emotions color wheel here, and he, as an expectation, anytime the kids had a question or a comment, they had to first say how they were feeling, right? I got to hear lots of awesome examples. My favorite one, a teenager said, "I'm feeling tired. Do we have to do all of these?" And I thought that was funny. But having that as the expectation that we're going to continuously report out how we're feeling, right? That builds resiliency while also building that developmental relationship component. As we move on to the next developmental relationship component, which is just providing support. How am I advocating for this child? How am I helping them learn how to navigate some of the things that might be going on in their lives, right? Does this child feel like they have the support that they need? Well, we can do this in several ways. I always say that building coping skills in a classroom is a great way to help navigate some of the hardships I'm experiencing. No matter if you're 5, or you're 17 or 45, we are always building new coping skills. And so even if you're in a high school environment, those kids still need to learn more coping skills. And when I have behaviors that show, that's really just telling you that I don't have a way of talking about this or a way of coping with this, so I run out of the classroom. Right? So by helping children learn how to talk about their feelings more, and then helping them find something in this building or at home that helps me feel better when this comes up, that's what we can do. And we can practice this in lots of ways, doing daily deep breathing, doing, mindfulness Mondays, and write it out journaling Wednesdays, or whatever, right? We can do this in a lot of different ways where we're incorporating and practicing different types of coping skills all day long. And that's providing them with the educational support of this emotional resilience skill. Another way that we can provide support, I think that's good for kids, especially now, is helping them kind of frame out what their actual support web looks like. Because I think that especially now, as we have COVID and some of those supports have been eliminated, right? Where maybe I used to be able to go talk to my 5th grade teacher, but now not allowed in that hallway or in that classroom because of contact tracing, right? So my supports have been kind of diminished. So helping kids just fill this out. And I start in that blue circle with me. Well, who's in that purple circle? The people that are the immediate support system for me, my family, my best friends, my closest teacher at school. Okay, so now how about that green zone? Who's the next layer out? Maybe, it's that administrator, maybe it's a friend that's in my friend group that I don't know super well, maybe it's a cousin that I see on holidays or text, right? That would be kind of that next layer out. Now, who's that group in that red zone, right? Maybe this is a neighbor or, my boss at work, right? Who are those people out there? So first helping kids kind of establish this, that you have a support system more than me, right? Yeah, I might be in your purple zone, but look, you've got all of these other adults in your life too that are here to support you. But then also having that conversation of, how do I move someone up a rung? Right. So, okay, so this person's in the green right now, but like, how do I move them into purple if I want? Right. How do I navigate that conversation? Right. How do I do that work? This is the way that we build that support through the building of resiliency skill. All right. The next one is sharing power is a developmental relationship component. How am I helping kids better, understand their leadership opportunities? How am I collaborating with kids, helping kids collaborate with each other? How am I letting kids lead, giving them voice and vote, right? This builds that relationship over time through mutual trust, right? When we share power. Well, one really great resiliency skill that can help with this is just basic conflict resolution and problem solving skills are resiliency skills, right? And so the way I like to practice this in classrooms is through compromise. I know many of us probably know people who are my way or the highway kind of people. Do you know my way or the highway kind of people? It's kind of hard to work with them. This happens a lot, especially in parent-child relationships, right? Where parents are my way or the highway for kids. And so then this child grows up and turns 18, and then we expect them to be really good at the skill of compromise that they've had zero practice at, right? If my parent is my way the highway, my teachers have been my way the highway, well, I don't have any practice in this. So as an educator, I look at my lesson plans for the week and see if I can on purpose give opportunity for classroom compromise, give opportunity for individual compromise, give opportunity for debate and vote, and all of those things that help me as an individual build that compromise skill over time, right? So I am building a resiliency skill while also sharing power for that developmental relationship. All right, the next component is challenging growth. Challenging growth, this is a great one that I think we do pretty well in schools already, but making sure that we're doing it with that on purpose kid, right? Where maybe, these 10 kids are feeling this challenged growth, but these 2 aren't yet, right? And so how do we on purpose challenge this growth? How do we scaffold and reflect on failures and all of those things that we want to do through challenging growth and helping provide that scaffolding for them? The way that I really like to do this, though, the one resiliency skill I like to build on for kids is insight, right? Personal insight. This goes back to that self-esteem conversation, right? What am I good at? What am I not so good at? And then once we've kind of had those conversations, moving into a more realistic or holistic growth mindset. So I know that many of us are using growth mindset, which is great. I love growth mindset. I'm all for power of yet. I think it's great. But I think sometimes we get a little tunnel visioned on the growth mindset stuff where we'll say, oh, don't worry about it. You just got to keep practicing. Just not yet. Right. And we kind of forget that there's things like personal interests and will, right? And I think about my own kid. We play games with my kids where I say, what are you good at? What are you not so good at? Right. And so one time my son said he wasn't so good at flossing, and he meant like this kind of flossing. Right. And I could have fallen into that idea of like, well, just not yet. And you could do this, you could do that. Right. But my first question has to be, okay, well, do you need to know how to floss? Well, I mean, you need to know this flossing, right? But do you need this? No, I don't need that. No, I don't need to know how to do that. Okay. Do you want to get better at it? And my son said, not really. So had I gone into this whole thing about just not yet, right? And like, well, I don't even really want to know how to do it better. And that's okay. Right. So how can we incorporate that shared power and challenging growth for them? Right. So we're saying, okay, you want to grow this? Awesome. Let's seek out new resources. Let's fall down that growth mindset pattern. But if you don't want to get better at it, is there something else you want to do? Right. And so this is what, for my son and I, drove us down a YouTube spiral of figuring out all the Fortnite dances and now why my son's good at the hype. Right. That it doesn't have to be that thing if you don't need it. Right. That we can actually help build that growth together. And it doesn't have to be the thing that always falls into that tunnel vision of growth mindset. All right. The last one then is expanding possibilities for kids. And this is really stretching kids to connect with them outside of our relationship, right? So how am I connecting you with other community members? How am I connecting you with the school community as a whole, right? So moving from just, hey, I care about you, to, hey, I want you to do better, to now, hey, there are some other people who are interested in this, and you might be able to be engaged further into the community with this. Again, this is building those assets through this developmental relationship content. And then the last thing I'm going to talk to you about here is through the process of Sparks. I find Spark work to best be used in this component, because working with Sparks is really about working with true passion, right? And so the Search Institute kind of built this idea of Spark work around a quote by the philosopher Plutarch. And what Plutarch said was that children are not vessels to be filled, but are fires to be lit. Children are not vessels to be filled, but are fires to be lit. And so the Search Institute said, well, if there are fires to be lit, then that must mean that there's sparks. There's these embers inside each of us that are just waiting to be fostered into flames, right? And so how can we as adults recognize, identify what those sparks are, and then provide opportunity for those kids to get their goals met, but also even help us get our goals met by utilizing these sparks. Now, helping kids identify sparks actually is a lot easier than you think it might be. A spark is just that thing that, and many of us have many sparks, but it's the thing that you really enjoy, you really like doing it. It's something that, time disappears when you're doing it, kind of thing, right? I want to caution you, you don't have to be good at it for it to be your spark. And just because I'm good at something doesn't mean it's my spark. I think sometimes we kind of fall into that, well, he's really good at math, that must be his spark, right? I mean, you guys, I am really good at cleaning toilets. Please do not be my champion and provide me more opportunity to clean toilets, right? Just because I'm good at something doesn't mean it's my spark, right? So when we think about what this spark is, how do we build that for that child by advocating and providing opportunities? So I'll give my own personal story. So my personal spark is talking and telling jokes, right? I have many others, but this is kind of the main one. Time disappears when I talk and, go crazy. Well, in school, this got me into a lot of trouble. When I was a kid, I was heavily disciplined as a child. And I think about my 6th grade teacher in particular. Her name was Mrs. Meanie Pants. And, she had a real fun way of interacting with my spark where, she'd give me lots of detentions. She gave me an in-school suspension. She finally decided what she was going to do was put me at a desk all by myself in the back of the room so that no one else would talk to me. And she told everyone to ignore me, and she ignored me for the rest of the semester too. Well, I failed that math class. I failed every math class after that. You guys think I'm smart. I'm not. I don't know my multiplication tables to this day. But I think about that a lot. And I think about, had she sat in one of my sessions now, if she could see the way that I use my spark now, if she could see it as less of a distraction, less of a disrespectful action, right? If she could see it as an opportunity to provide me opportunities to succeed and thrive. Could she see it differently? And instead of saying, go in the back of the room and ignore you, say, you know what? I want you to help me teach the next lesson. I would have been like, oh, what? You want me in front of the room, be the center of attention for everyone? That sounds amazing. But to teach it, you got to know it. So I need you to come in during your study home. We'll work on the concept so that you know it, so that you can teach it, right? Providing opportunity to get my goals met and yours too. I've seen this done in so many environments at schools where, kids who are refusing to read, and the teacher says, well, if you illustrate the book, we'll make illustrated copies for all the younger kids. Well, I got to read it to illustrate it, right? Kids who get put in charge of the joke of the day, but it has to be related to the content we're talking about today. Now, all of a sudden, I got this kid who's doing research at home on the content we're talking about today just to find a joke that's funny for today, right? Taking a spark and saying, you can do something with this. This can be something for you. And I'm going to help you find opportunities to get your goals met. That's what real thriving looks like. Remembering that as we're building these 40 assets, right? That it's small things, that it's ways of engaging kids through relationship, through building resilience, through finding their passion spark and stretching, right? That helps build these overall survival kids. And I had that teacher in high school. My 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Meanie Pants. My 11th grade creative writing teacher saw something different in me, right? And saw that, no, this is not something that bad kids do, what you're doing. This is what leaders do. And I can show you how to be a better leader. And without that teacher, I wouldn't be here today. You have the power to build that relationship and build those skills that help children conquer and overcome even the most difficult of circumstances, right? It's not about what I've been through. It's about that stack of protective factors I have had that help protect me from those things. And you can be the people who do that for kids. I am so thankful again that you guys gave me a little bit of your time. I know I stuffed so much information into so little time, and I did go over 2 minutes again, and I'm so sorry about that. But thank you so much. And if you have questions, you can pop them into the chat. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Missy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all of our attendees. I'm going to stop the recording right now. I want to tell everyone